Hello and welcome back to another episode of Age Better, where each week we take a deep dive into all the ways we can feel better, look better, live better, and age better. I'm your host, Barbara Hannah Grufferman. Hey, today marks the start of an empowering 4-part series dedicated entirely to your health, specifically aimed at midlife women. May is not only Women's Health Month, but also Osteoporosis Awareness and Prevention Month. So we're zeroing in on a critical aspect of wellness that could very well change the quality of your life now and how you age later, bone health. In this first episode of a 4-part series focusing on midlife women's health, we delve into actionable strategies that can help you proactively strengthen your bones and ward off osteoporosis. I'm joined by the inspiring Rebekah Rotstein, founder of Buff Bones, a pioneering program that leverages exercise to combat bone loss. After being diagnosed with osteoporosis at a very young age, Rebekah has become a passionate advocate for bone health, developing a program that has transformed countless lives through movement and education. She's been on the show before. So should this matter to you? Well, yes. Consider this. Statistics from the Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation, where I have served as a trustee for almost 10 years, show that after menopause, the risk of osteoporosis spikes due to a significant decrease in estrogen, which leads to a decrease in bone density. In fact, half of all women over the age of 50 will suffer a bone fracture because of osteoporosis. These aren't just statistics. They're a wake-up call to take action right now. I created this series to arm you with the necessary knowledge and tools, not just to slow bone loss, but to possibly reverse it. And Rebekah will talk through the most effective exercises you can do to build back better bones. So whether you're approaching midlife, right in the middle of it like me, the information we share today will empower you to make informed decisions about your health right now so you can age better later. So pop in your earbuds, go out for a nice bone-building walk, and learn how you can build back better bones. And don't forget, next week, my guests are Dr. Jennifer Mirez and Dr. Stacy Rosen, 2 esteemed cardiologists from Northwell Health, and we'll talk about everything you can do starting today to have a healthy heart for the rest of your life. Stay tuned.
If you're struggling to lose weight, you've probably heard about weight loss medications like Wegovy or Zepbound, and you might be wondering if they're right for you. Meet PlushCare, a leading telehealth provider with doctors who are there for you day and night to partner with you in your weight loss journey. If you qualify, they can safely prescribe you medication from the comfort of your own home. To get started, visit plushcare.com/weightloss. That's plushcare.com/weightloss. plushcare.com/weightloss.
Mom deserves the best, and there's no better place to shop for Mother's Day than Whole Foods Market. They're your destination for unbeatable savings, from premium gifts to show-stopping flowers and irresistible desserts. Start by saving 33% with Prime on all body care and candles. Then get a 15-stem bunch of tulips for just $9.99 each with Prime. Round out Mom's menu with festive rosé, irresistible berry chantilly cake, and more special treats. Come celebrate Mother's Day at Whole Foods Market.
Hello, Rebekah, and welcome back to Age Better. I'm so happy to have you back on again. You were on the show last year when you told us about your personal bone health story. But this time we're going to be talking about, bones once again. But May is Women's Health Month. So we want to talk about midlife women's health and all facets of it. But it's also Osteoporosis Awareness and Prevention Month. And that's why you and I are going to be talking about my favorite topic, your favorite topic, bone health. Hello, Rebekah.
Thanks so much for having me back, Barbara.
Okay, so we did have a really great episode together talking about your backstory. And for anyone who didn't hear that or wants to hear it again, the link to that episode will be in the show notes. So you can definitely all listen to that after you listen to this one. Reminder, everyone, this is part 1 of a 4-part series focusing on women's midlife health. And I just want you to know that we're going to have 3 others. Next week, we're going to have 2 incredible cardiologists on the show talking about heart health. So please don't miss that. So, Rebekah, let's go a little bit back and talk about the basics. What is Buff Bones and what do you hope to achieve with your company?
Well, Buff Bones is my company, which is an exercise method and also public advocacy for bone and joint health. And we have a big emphasis on midlife women, specifically because for many years they've been overlooked and because we come from a side of prevention, really, where bone health traditionally is often dealt with once you've had a fracture or more in an elderly population. And we know that we can really prevent fractures by intervening sooner. And especially at midlife as women, we can lose up to 20% of our bone mass in the first 5 to 7 years after menopause. So even before that actually is a great time to intervene. But around that time is really when we need to start paying attention to our bones. And that's how we can also be preventing fractures for the years to come.
Traditionally, bone density treatment has relied heavily on medication as the main treatment. But there's new research and something that you personally believe in, and that's really the foundation of your company, Buff Bones, that it really challenges the view that bone cannot be rebuilt without medication. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we've known for many years that exercise can be beneficial to bones, that the mechanical stimulation or forces upon the bones can help strengthen it and support the bone tissue itself. For many years, we really thought it was more in a situation after menopause, in the presence of osteoporosis, we really thought it was just to prevent further decline. And in more recent years, newer research has actually debunked that, showing that higher intensity exercise can, in fact, not only just prevent the decline of bone mass, but also possibly even increase it. So this comes down to a big study that was published in 2017, a randomized controlled trial, looking over the course of 8 months at twice a week, high intensity weightlifting, just 2 30-minute sessions. And they were looking at an intensity of 80 to 85%, 1 rep max, meaning the most that you could do for a single rep, and then 80 to 85% of that. So they were using 5 sets of 5 reps of these exercises and all supervised. And it was about 100 women that were over age 60. And they found statistically significant improvements in the femoral neck of the hip, as well as the lumbar spine. And there were not changes, though, observed within some of the bone architecture. But this was really exciting news, especially because for so long, many women were told to avoid weightlifting or even especially heavier lifting for fear that it could induce fracture. Since then, there have been more studies that have been done pointing to high intensity usually as the way to improve bone density after menopause. But there is new research that is exploring moderate versus high because we do need more of a head-to-head comparison of those. And we also need to have some more research that is parsing out the strength training versus the impact training. But other research since then has also been conducted with those researchers, and they found similar results, but at the same time, they've also not always found that it can improve the hip strength. I shouldn't say strength, I should say the bone density of the hip. So in a more recent trial, they found that it still improved the lumbar spine, but it didn't actually improve the total hip density. But the point of this is simply that weightlifting can be a good thing, and it can actually be really, really beneficial to the bones in the absence even of medication.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned high intensity exercise and then medium intensity exercise. Can you just explain those two a little bit more?
Sure. So high intensity, when we're talking about weightlifting specifically, high intensity is usually considered about 5 sets of 5 reps. So a rep is, say you're doing something that you're familiar with, a bicep curl. You do 5 of those are 5 reps, you take a break, and then you do another 4 sets to make a total of 5 sets. And so what is usually considered the intensity to make it high is, say, 5 sets of that. That would be like, say, a 5 rep max, or going about 80, 85% of what's called the 1 rep max, the most that you can do in one single rep, and then you go down. So for instance, say you're lifting 100 pounds in one exercise, 80 or 85% would mean that you're doing 80 or 85 pounds, because the most that you could do in one single repetition to failure was 100 pounds. Now, moderate usually is anywhere from like 8 to 15 reps. So if you're not going to do a single 1 rep max to see what the most you can do is, you can kind of modulate it by, well, can I go about 5 and can I go more? Or am I done at 5 versus like 8 reps or more? And then low intensity is usually even less than that. The interesting thing, though, is that even though the researchers of that found that low intensity was not effective for increasing bone mineral density, other studies actually have shown some improvement. One study even found that the low intensity group was able to increase the femoral neck cortical thickness, this is part of the hip, and the total hip thickness. So actually the size of the bone, which is a positive thing. But in general, the consensus is usually that the lower intensity is not as effective for bone density specifically. There are other strength and other outcomes that can be effective for that. But if we're isolating bone density specifically, it's the moderate to high and pointing usually, at least as of right now in the research, pointing more towards the higher intensity.
How does someone decide what the appropriate amount of weight is to use for them? I mean, that can be a little frightening for someone to pick up what you said, 85% of, and how do you even know what is 85% of what you could possibly work with? I would assume that you need to be with a professional when you're doing this. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So first of all, that research was always done supervised. So this is not recommended to be conducted unsupervised. And you don't start out with that. That's the whole point, is that the big key word and big takeaway of this is that it's progressive. So the body is adaptive, the body is very resilient. And that's one of the great things about the muscular system as well as the skeletal system in our bodies. They're incredibly plastic. So they adapt in the sense that something that is hard for you now, after your body gets accustomed to it and acclimates, it's no longer challenging. So then you need to continuously stimulate that challenge or add more challenge in. There's a variety of ways that you can do that, one of which is increasing the load. You definitely would not start out at such a high weight. And also, you'd probably do some warm up as well beforehand. You're not going to go straight into this without working on your form, without warming up the tissues. And, there's a whole variety of ways to be doing that. But the key is, how do you start? Well, first of all, you work with somebody that is trained. You also, with what we do with Buff Bones is we do a whole method and approach to conditioning the body to address any different pathomechanics or issues that are going on in the body. Also making sure, do you have the sufficient range of motion for various exercises? Because if there's limitations and restrictions in the joint, that can pose problems. Again, addressing the way that you perform certain movements, like basic movements, before you even start adding in load. Can you even do certain things with your body weight, for instance? So there's a whole variety and number of ways that you can approach it.
So you have to be assessed by a professional who would then help you to progress in the load and the number of reps and so on and so forth, right?
I would definitely recommend working with somebody because,
Oh, so
again,
do I. So do I.
there's
I can't imagine personally ever embarking on such a thing with this level of supervision. I mean, right now I'll go to a gym and I'll lift some free weights, but not the way that we're talking about now, in a
right.
very progressive way. So I think it's everyone listening, please, if you are thinking about this, first of all, go on to buffbones.com. Is that right?
With a hyphen between buff-bones.com.
With a hyphen between, right? The link will be in the show notes, everyone, so you can check that out. But to get the information. And also, Rebekah, one of the great things that you do with your company is you also go around the country and you train others, because not everyone can get to you. You're in one part of the country and not everyone can come to you. So you do train others around the country who can supervise people in other parts of the country, correct?
Yes. So we've been training exercise professionals for over a decade now. I guess it's probably 13 years. And it's interesting. A lot has changed as the research has changed. And we've often adapted with that as new information comes out. And yet, no matter what, there's still the same elements of foundation and fundamentals of understanding how the body operates and body conditioning as well. So that no matter what you do, there are certain things that really need to be part of your movement foundation.
Mm-hmm. And the good news here, too, is that not only will this method help you, hopefully, to, if done correctly and done consistently, too, which I'm sure is a key to success here, sticking with it and committing, but not only will hopefully your bone density improve or at least stop the loss, but also your strength will improve, your muscle mass will improve, which all contributes to how you live your life. I mean, I'm a big believer in that. You want to be able to put your suitcase over the head bin above your seat in the airplane or the train. You want to be able to do those things. You want to be able to lift your grandchild or your dog. And these are super important too. And of course, we don't want to fall and break a bone, which is the number one thing. But yes.
Well, you bring up that idea of muscle strength and daily function, which is key, that it's more than just the density of your bones. Mm-hmm. It's how does your body function? How is it going to sustain you in addition to avoiding fractures, but just to be able to be mobile, right, to be able to move, to have agility and such. And it's interesting. There was a study done 2 years ago of almost 1,000 midlife men and women age 40 to 59, finding a positive correlation between muscle mass index and bone density. And so, strengthening and we've known that there's a relationship for many years, but it's usually looking at older individuals. And we know that not only do you lose 1% of your bone mass, usually, I said you can lose up to 1% of your bone mass per year after age 40. But also we lose muscle mass and muscle power. And this is known as sarcopenia. And sarcopenia is that loss of muscle strength as well as muscle power that gradually happens. And you see this very frequently in older individuals. And even a term is now being used of osteosarcopenia because of this direct relationship between muscle and bone loss. And so we need to be just strengthening our muscles to prevent that natural decline.
Absolutely. And what safety precautions are necessary, would you say, Rebekah, for women, particularly those who already have been diagnosed with osteoporosis, to begin a weightlifting regimen like this?
Well, this is the interesting thing, is that study that I was talking about excluded a number of different types of people. And this often is the case. So those with lower extremity injuries or surgery or back pain, those who had a fracture in the last year, those who are taking certain bone affecting medications other than just like an osteoporosis drug. And we see this very frequently, that a lot of people in the general population are actually excluded from these studies because it complicates the data. But the problem is that's a reality of comorbidities or different conditions and injuries that a majority of people, especially over 50, tend to have. So we have to keep this information with a grain of salt. We also have to keep in mind that those with a history of fractures, especially spine fractures, should have individualized attention.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the weightlifting, or maybe especially the heavy lifting, may not be appropriate for them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, those, if you've had a prolapse or if you have arthritis, maybe you have certain joint laxity issues or hypermobility. It's not to say that you can't do lifting or heavy lifting, but it may have to be more personalized and structured toward you and your individual case. So I think these need to be taken into consideration. And again, it's the idea that it's about your form, how you're really only good as your form is. And then also keeping in mind that it is progressive, so that you're not going straight in, that you're going in perhaps at a lower dose, and then you're slowly increasing the dosage and exposure.
So next question is related to that exact thing. What kind of commitment are we talking about here? I mean, I would like to say it's got to be lifelong, which I'm sure you would agree, but what level of commitment is required for someone to see real benefits, to someone to stay motivated to continue with this program? What are we looking at?
Well, it is consistency. You're 100% right. And usually it's 2 to 3 times a week of strength training, and specifically weightlifting as strength training, because you can do strength training with just your own body weight, but we're talking about adding in external loads. And so, again, it's the consensus and the research is pointing towards 2 to 3 times a week. Now, that said, also there's a strong emphasis in any kind of strength training with the guidelines for osteoporosis toward things that also include not only the weight bearing, but also strengthening for the abdominals, the back extensors, especially for the spine, elements for the hips. But I feel that even if you're only doing it once a week, that's still better than nothing. So I think one of the big challenges that people get into is the fear of commitment, whether it's, I have to do this much. Well, I'm not even going to do it at all. And I want to try and break that barrier. If you can even do it once a week, great. Something still is better than nothing. Mm-hmm. So try not to get into the all or nothing mindset, especially if there are barriers. And I'm working with a physical therapist for our upcoming Bone Health and Osteoporosis ISO conference we're talking about. And we're also talking about one of the things that has to do with social barriers to health. There are limitations that are in place and barriers to access that may be issues that we're not acknowledging. So I want to acknowledge and hold space for everybody that it may not be an option for everybody to hire a personal trainer or to have a gym membership in order to get the kind of loads that you may not be able to access at home. But still, there are things that you can be doing, and maybe it's not going to increase your bone density, but maybe it will mitigate bone loss.
Right.
And it'll improve your balance, and it'll improve your function. It'll improve other aspects of strength and muscle strength. So keeping in mind the entire picture so that we don't say, this is not an option for me. Never mind, I'm not going to do anything.
Right. And thank you for pointing that out. I'd like to use me as a really good example of exactly that. When I discovered I had low bone density after I broke my arm just taking a walk, when I turned 50, and that was 17 years ago, of course, I got my first bone density test, and that's when I discovered where I was in that spectrum. And I went on a crash course, if you will, of a strengthening and resistance training and the like, using my own body weight, which is what I continue to do. So what we're talking about, squats and push up and the plank, really those 3 are, with some occasional free weights thrown in for good measure when I go to a gym. But I'm primarily a runner, so I do these other things to supplement that. But what I've discovered is 17 years later, and I do get a bone density test every 2 years now, and I just had one less than a year ago, actually 6 months ago. And I have, as you said, I've maintained my bone density. I have not lost anymore. So it's been successful for what it is. And I haven't had to commit to going to a gym. That's only very occasionally. It's been wherever, whenever I want. And it really is very accessible. And that's something I really talk a lot about. And so thank you for bringing that up. However, I do want to point this out, and you and I have discussed this briefly offline and will again, but I'm planning on really juicing up my bone, my weightlifting and my bone density, my personal bone density building plan. It's like a decision I've made this year, and I am going to embark on a plan as you've been describing that Buff Bones does. Rebekah, what do you see? I mean, you're totally in this field. You're looking at the research all the time. What do you see happening? Anything coming down the pike in terms of new research or new ways of doing things?
Well, there is an interesting study that we won't have the data from for a couple of years, but it will be very interesting to see what their findings are as they do more of a head-to-head of the moderate versus the high intensity of the weightlifting, I should say, specifically. Also, looking at strength training versus impact. The big study I was mentioning used a combination of both. Well, we can't really parse out which was more effective. And do we need to? Maybe, maybe not. But it's also interesting. And that's what scientists do like to do, is to identify what is the key factor, right? So I think we will have more information in the coming years about the relevance of one versus the other. So far, it seems that the quality of data on impact is not as beneficial.
Excuse me, I want to just interrupt you for a minute. Explain what impact is. Does that mean jumping jacks, doing burpees? Is that the kind of impact you're talking about?
Yes, but let me specify even more. High impact would be jumping. Low impact would be just stomping your feet. So for instance, if you've had a fracture, high impact may be contraindicated. It might not be advised for you. Again, it depends on the person. But low impact, or I like something called heel drops, where you're just standing with your knees straight. You lift your heels and you let them just fall. And you get that reverberation essentially through your body. So that's an example of low impact versus jumping up and down, running, etc. would be high impact. And so the quality of the data seems not to be as good, I guess I would
not
say,
as robust
for the impact. Yes, in terms of the researchers who are deep in this, in the thick of this, and identifying high versus lower quality of data and research. So that's something that I think we're going to get more information on. And again, also moderate versus high. So again, in terms of, say you're doing deadlifts, a deadlift is something that's very simple that you probably do a similar movement to all the time when you pick up your laundry basket. It's not that heavy unless you've added other weights and stuff into your laundry basket. But so, for instance, with something like a deadlift, if you're doing 5 sets of 5, because you're totally wiped out after 5 reps, that's where it would be a high intensity. But a moderate is, say you can do 8 to 12 or even up to 15, perhaps. That would be a more moderate intensity. There are a lot of people who prefer moderate, a lot of people who prefer high. There's benefits to both in terms of what you prefer of exertion, time commitment, etc. And so it will be interesting to see if one does, in a head-to-head, really appear to be better than the other.
Yeah. I mean, I say, why not do both? I mean, why not? That's what I've been doing is like I run. So that's impact exercise, and then doing the exercises that I mentioned to you before, the squats and the like. And so I've been combining those all these years, and they do seem to work. So why not do both? Unless, of course, it's contraindicated for you if you have certain issues where you can't do one or the other. Even walking is impact, but running is more so.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should walk. There's so many benefits to walking,
So
and especially
many.
if you're outdoors. But when it comes to your bones, it's not enough stimulation. So it's a great adjunct to do like on your off day. I'm going to do one this afternoon. I'm going to go out for a nice walk. But at the same time, don't rely on that as your primary, quote, intervention for bone health.
Right. Rebekah, as always, this was an incredible conversation. So helpful, so useful, actionable information. I mean, this one's a little It's interesting because I think people are listening now and going to have to make a decision. Do I want to make this kind of commitment, time commitment, and possibly financial commitment to get someone to oversee what I'm doing and my progress and keep me going? And I really encourage everyone to consider this very, very seriously for all the reasons that we just talked about, for your bones, for your muscles, for your life, and how you live your life and how you age. One of my favorite new mantras is, do this now so you can age better later. So simple. It's like such a great concept. Do it. Just do it, as Nike would say.
Right.
Yeah. So we talked about so many great things, and thank you again for that. And I know you'll be back again, but do you have, say, 3 takeaways you really want the Age Better audience to remember from our conversation today?
Yeah, I think one thing would be to remember that there are so many options out there. So don't feel pigeonholed into you have to do one thing or it's all going downhill. You do have to choose what you're going to actually commit to. And committing to something and being consistent with it is going to be the key, as opposed to avoiding something that you dread or really are not going to do. So know that options are available. There are a number of options. And also just know that, again, with the diagnosis of osteoporosis, there are so many possibilities and there's so much potential. I just got a message, in fact, yesterday from somebody that really was very heartwarming, pointing out that she not only has not fractured in the last couple years, but also found increases in her bone density from doing the work that we're doing. Also, she was working privately as well with a personal trainer on top of this. She did also go in and choose to do medication. But whether you choose medication or not, there's absolutely no medication that will maintain or build muscle strength. No medication that will help you with your balance, that will help you avoid stiffness and discomfort that comes from just getting older. And that's not referring to, just joint pain of estrogen deficiency or estrogen loss. I'm talking about just stiffness that happens.
And boy, do I have that.
We have to be active. Just know that there's so many possibilities and so many options that you have. And there's always hope that you're not doomed to fracture. And taking care of your body physically is one of the best things you can also do mentally as well.
Yes. And, I'm so glad that you said that before. Sure, a medication can help you with your bone loss. For sure. We know that's proven for many, many people. However, by doing these other things, by moving your body in the ways that we've been talking about all this time, will not only benefit your bones, but your muscles, as we said, and also probably, help manage your weight, increase a good mood. And we know this to be true from recent studies that this specific kind of exercise, strength training and weightlifting, benefits your brain in major, major ways. And of course, your heart, your whole body benefits when you exercise.
It's multi-systemic. Literally every system of your body benefits from physical activity. And it's one of the best things that you can do, as we were saying, mentally as well.
Absolutely.
Invest in yourself.
Invest in yourself so you can age better later. That's what I say. Rebekah, thank you so much for coming on. Again, I know you'll be back and I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for joining me during Women's Health Month, focusing on midlife women's health, which is what we're doing. And remember, everyone, that next week we have 2 just incredible cardiologists, Dr. Stacy Rosen, Dr. Jennifer Ramirez. They're both from the Northwell Health System in New York City, and they are senior cardiologists, been doing this for decades, and you will thoroughly enjoy listening to them. So thank you again for joining me, Rebekah, and thank you again for joining me today, everyone. Talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of Age Better Podcast, please do a few things. First, share it with all your friends and family. Then, subscribe to Age Better wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, so you never miss a single episode. Finally, if you have ideas for topics you want me to cover in a future episode of Age Better, send an email to agebetterpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to me on social media. Until next time, remember this: we can't control getting older, but we can control how we do it. Talk to you soon. Age Better Podcast is a proud member of the Sound Advice Network. Sound Advice, women's voices amplified.